Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Browns joint practice number 2 with the Philadelphia Eagles, and this is the first time in all of the years the Browns have been doing joint practice with the Eagles. I think they've done it 3 times, where I feel like the consensus, not just from Cleveland people, but Philly people, is that the Browns won the day of practice. If you listen to Brandon Gowden, Eagles reporter, put it, he's the editor-in-chief of Bleeding Green, right? Like, credible guy in their media space. And he said the Browns are dominating Eagles practice today. This is shocking because of all the years we had hopes that the Browns would go into joint practice with the Philadelphia Eagles. This was not one of those years where we thought we were going to come out and say that the Browns won today. Now, again, it's winning a day in practice. The Browns won a day in practice last year versus the Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota Vikings went on to have a much better season than the Cleveland Browns. So I'm not saying this is indicative of anything in the regular season or to put your bets down that the Browns are going to make the playoffs or anything irresponsible like that. But I'm just pointing out the fact that that's strange, but it's a good sign, right? It's a good sign. All the years we had Deshaun Watson, we're like, hey, we're going to try to be a Super Bowl contender. We never came close to looking competitive with Philly in these practices. This week, for whatever reason, we trade blows the first day. There was really nobody saying anybody won that day. And then today they're saying the Browns won it. Now, again, the Eagles are coming off a Super Bowl. They got other things to worry about. They're not that stressed about practicing the Cleveland Browns. They didn't have some of their veterans play. Of course, Philly is not going to take this as seriously as Cleveland, but that's been the case almost every time that the Browns have practiced against Philadelphia, right? Where Philly's at a much better place than the Cleveland Browns are and have much, much, much less to prove. And the Browns still haven't been able to kind of come out looking better than the other team. The fact that they look better, not just to Cleveland people today, but to Philly people, it's not everything, but it's not nothing. And there's something in that. It's a hell of a saying. But in all seriousness, it is a good sign, right? From all reports, it feels like the Browns offense showed some life today. The Browns defense continued to show life. The secondary didn't get toasted as much. That had a lot to do with A.J. Brown not practicing today, but still the secondary didn't get toasted because I'm still very concerned about that secondary. So it's nice to see them battle back, have a better day there. And also, Myles Garrett's looking like the best defensive player in the universe. He was already that, but it seems like he's gotten better this offseason. When I saw him at camp, he looked faster and more athletic and more focused than I've ever seen him. Again, he needs to not drive 100 miles per hour in the 60s, same as Shedeur Sanders and same as a lot of football players in the NFL and in college football, because, one mistake there could end somebody else's life or end his life or significantly alter somebody's life. And that's not anything that Myles should have to be even contemplating at this point. And he's only putting himself in that position. But they were out there at practice. Myles Garrett was basically destroying every rep he was in. He just looks superhuman. He looks untouchable. He has defensive tackle help. That's going to be a real thing this year, probably. Myles is probably going to be due up for a good year as long as he can not be stupid and stop getting caught speeding, or not getting caught, stop speeding in general, so he can actually play on Sundays and fulfill his potential, because he has also had a season ruined because of that kind of stuff before. So he really should know better. So my annoyance with Myles Garrett's habit here, in the lack of change that we have seen from him, despite being a team leader and much older than Shedeur Sanders, right? Like, should know a lot better than a 23-year-old kid. That all aside, he looks amazing so far, and that's a good sign for the Browns. So we'll talk about the implications of that even further in just a few minutes here. But another thing I want to bring up real quick is, hey, if you want to join a connected franchise or a connected dynasty with me on college football 26 or Madden 26, make sure you join the Patreon dog check tier level. You see the prompt pop up on the Patreon. Comment your gamer tag or your PSN name and what game you would like to be added to. For that league, I'm going to be taking submissions all week. So make sure you do that if you're still interested. And I will be adding select YouTube members as well. So keep an eye out for that. But the fastest way to make sure you're added to the list is join the Patreon dog check tier level. Boom. Also want to talk about some of the stuff on the injury front, specifically Shedeur Sanders here. Yesterday, we figured out that he had a oblique strain. That's why he missed all of practice yesterday, and he missed practice today. He's being considered day-to-day. It is seemingly unlikely that he will play in the preseason game. Oddly enough, they haven't ruled him out, right? So maybe he plays, maybe he doesn't. I do know that the Browns have alluded to the fact that he would have started in this preseason game, which I think is a pretty significant detail, because I would have expected Dillon Gabriel to have started this preseason game or to be penciled in as the starter for this preseason game, simply because you want to get kind of identical looks at both of these guys, right? And you want to start Dillon Gabriel and give him the best look versus Philly's team versus what you saw with Shedeur a little bit against the ones and the twos of the Carolina Panthers. I thought you would want to do the same here with Shedeur. Oh, well, not with Shedeur, but with Dillon. But apparently Shedeur was going to start that game. Dillon was going to play in relief of Shedeur. That's interesting. You know, that's an interesting detail that hasn't been talked about as much, that I feel like does lend some insights to something with the Browns quarterback room. Again, I will stand on the fact that I think people are getting way too ramped up, way too revved up over a situation in the quarterback room that will eventually sort itself out if you just give it some time, right? The Browns quarterback situation will eventually sort itself out. And when I say that, I mean, you're going to see Dillon Gabriel. You're going to be able to form an opinion on him this season based on regular season work. You're going to be able to see Shedeur Sanders and form an opinion on him based on regular season work. I think a lot of people are kind of arguing about reps and arguing about opportunity. And maybe it's the Browns' fault for marketing this as a four-way quarterback competition when it never was a four-way quarterback competition. I thought it was always obvious that it was not a four-way quarterback competition, but apparently that is not the case. I think that has led to a lot of problems, right? Where people are mincing these reps and not really seeing the forest for the trees and everything else like that. But yeah, Shedeur oblique strain, still questionable, right? Still might play on Saturday. You know, there's a lot of time between now and Saturday. Like, you know, the oblique strain doesn't seem like it is super serious. So you get pretty much most of Wednesday off, Thursday, Friday. It's 3 days off. It's not out the realm of possibility that he could feel much better and be ready to play, maybe in a more limited capacity than he was going to play before, but be ready to play a little bit in that game, just because the reps would be important for him. Either way, you know, I don't know how about y'all, but I'm actually excited to see Dillon Gabriel, not because I have high hopes of him, but I just want to see what he looks like in an actual live game setting, you know. I know everybody's all amped up about Shedeur and everything else, but I think getting a look at Dillon Gabriel is going to be important, just to see where he's at, because he's another young quarterback on this roster that the Browns have taken, you know, a little bit of a flyer on, right? So let's see what he looks like, what that progress looks like. And, you know, for somebody like me who hit my main concern about Dillon Gabriel is his height, I really would appreciate being able to see Dillon Gabriel play actual quarterback with actual live contact, so I can see if some of my concerns are maybe, you know, overstated about his height. Like maybe he's good at finding those passing lanes and getting the ball out on time, and he's going to be able to figure out how to play at 5'11". It's rare, but, you know, maybe he's one of those rare guys who can figure it out. You're not going to know until you play him in some live contact situations. So, you know, I'm excited to be able to watch him. And if you want to watch Dillon Gabriel play with me, make sure you're subscribed and notified, because I will be live when that game happens. But all in all, this is a good update to hear, right? And again, it's not just coming from Browns media, and honestly, Browns media is more cynical towards the Browns sometimes than other teams' media. If I'm being honest with you, because Browns media is just so used to being cynical about the Cleveland Browns. People like Daniel Fuisi, who is not like coming from the Cleveland market, but coming from ESPN, has worked in different markets. He seems to be pretty positive about what the Browns put on tape today. Harold Fanin had a touchdown. The run game seemed to have some life. The Browns defense was all over the place, making plays. Jerry Jeudy was able to make plays. He beat Quinyon Mitchell for a touchdown here in practice. There was a lot of winning for the Cleveland Browns offense here. And, when you're going up against a defense as good as Philadelphia's is, you'll take that where you can get it. And it kind of makes me think, right, about what happened last year and the answer to the question of, like, is this team just bad? I don't believe the Browns are a bad football team. I think they are a team that shot themselves in the foot last year, but I don't think that this roster is bad, that this roster is incapable of playing good football. I think they have massive questions at quarterback, and I think that's going to be the big question with them, right? But I think if they get decent quarterback play in a given game, I think this Browns team is capable of beating anybody. The problem is they're not going to get consistent quarterback play, good quarterback play every game. Like, if this team right now, you just erase their quarterback problem and you dropped in Joe Burrow to this roster, they would be a serious contender. Because they got Joe Burrow, obviously he brings that consistency of excellence at the quarterback position, or like a Lamar Jackson or whatever quarterback, Josh Allen, you want to throw in there, right? Pat Mahomes. If you dropped an elite quarterback on this team, obviously they would be a serious contender, because you look at that defense, if they have a quarterback, there's going to be something there, right? They have the wide receiver to make things happen. And that seems obvious, right? But what's also true about this team is that if they just get decent quarterback play, if they had Dak Prescott as their quarterback, they probably would be a playoff contender every year, because this roster is good. I think last year we saw it. The Browns were a 3-win team last year, but look at 2 of those wins they got in that 3-win season. They beat 2 playoff teams. It doesn't happen very often that a 3-win team manages to beat 2 playoff teams. One of those teams were the Baltimore Ravens on the road, I believe, with Jameis Winston. Was that on the road or was that at home? Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. But still, you beat the Baltimore Ravens and you beat the Pittsburgh Steelers last year. 2 teams that won double-digit games, 2 teams that went to the playoffs last year. And the reason you were able to do it is because you finally got decent quarterback play in those 2 games. And when you got decent quarterback play, you were able to beat really good teams. I think that's going to be the story of this Cleveland Browns team. How often will they get consistent quarterback play? Because when they do, it's going to be obvious they can compete with anybody. This team almost beat Philadelphia last year, the team who won the Super Bowl, with Deshaun Watson playing awful at quarterback in that game. They can lose to anybody, they can beat anybody. And it's all going to be about what level of quarterback play are they getting. If Joe Flacco can get you to a certain point and then you transition to Shador, or you transition to, Dylan Gabriel, and they're able to give you average to above average quarterback play, this team's probably going to be pretty good. Again, it's a joint practice. The Browns had a joint practice last year with the Minnesota Vikings. They dominated the Minnesota Vikings in day 2. It didn't mean much for their win-loss record. But I think even in that sentence, you can see my point being driven home here, which is, hey, that day, the day 2, was one of the rare days the Browns got decent quarterback play in practice out of Deshaun Watson. And then they were able to go toe-to-toe with one of the best defenses in the NFL, in the Minnesota Vikings, in a joint practice. Obviously, that didn't prepare us for just how inconsistent Deshaun Watson would be during that season. And that's the thing I would caution here, right, for anybody who's going to get overly optimistic because of this one joint practice. We don't know just how consistent or inconsistent Joe Flacco is going to be this year. We don't know if we're going to play Kenny Pickett or not. We don't know if Dylan Gabriel is going to be any good. We don't know if Shador Sanders is going to be any good. We could have just as bad quarterback play as we had last year and be just as disappointing of a football team as we were last year. We could have much better quarterback play than we had last year and be a much better team. But I think that's really going to hinge where this team sits, because everywhere else, they're good enough. They have a good wide receiver. They have a good tight end. The offensive line is fine. The run game will probably be okay, right? The defense will be good. They're good enough everywhere else, except for quarterback, where there's a huge question mark. Not saying that this team's a quarterback away, even though every team's a quarterback away. If you go from having no quarterback to having the best quarterback in the NFL, every team's a quarterback away, right? I'm not saying that this is a team that is a marginal upgrade at quarterback away from being a Super Bowl contender. There are still some things that they have to fix, some people that they need to get young, well, some positions, that they have to get younger and everything else. But what's there is still a core of a team that went through a lot of turmoil in 2023 and still won 11 games. And you can still see that shining out in specific moments with this team. The question is just going to be about quarterback play. And I think that's going to determine whether this is a 6-win season for this team, a 7, 8, 9, 10-win season for this team, is the quarterback play and what level of it that they get. I think the Browns are banking and betting on, and I think it's a pretty safe bet, that they're not going to be as bad at quarterback as they were last year. And you have to remember, the Browns weren't just the worst team in the NFL at quarterback. They were the worst team by a significant margin in the NFL at quarterback. Right, we're talking about, of quarterbacks with over 100 snaps in success percentage, the Browns were 46 and 47 with the two guys that they had take most of the snaps that season, Dorian Thompson-Robinson and Deshaun Watson. And that's when the Browns felt like the worst possible team they could be. I understand that they're a 3-win team, but I think they are much better than that if they could get close to even mediocre quarterback play. They're a much better team than that. We will ultimately see what this team can provide. But I think some good signs are there. The offensive line holding up in both joint practice days versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Good sign. The secondary looking a little shaky. Concern, but that just might be something we have to deal with. Quarterback play being a little shaky. It's a concern, but it might be something you have to deal with, right? Being able to go back and forth offensively with Philadelphia, I think that's a good sign. If you're the Browns and you're a Browns fan and you want to know what to take away from this joint practice, is that you're not as bad as your record says you were last year. I don't think anybody in that building at least believes that. Maybe some Browns fans believe that they're just as bad as that record said they were. And that's fair. Right. But I don't think anybody in that building truly believes that. And I think, being able to go to joint practice with the defending champs and, trade blows with them can instill some of that confidence in even further, that you're not as bad as you were last year, that there were reasons why you were as bad as you were last year. And I know some people get mad at me. These are the same people who rode for this guy at quarterback whenever I point this out, but it's simply the truth. Deshaun Watson was especially awful last year, and the same is true with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. And I don't think Ken Dorsey, I thought that would work out. It did not work out for this team, right? So there were some things that just went catastrophically wrong last year. And I think so far throughout camp, you don't get the feeling that things are going catastrophically bad. It does not feel like the Tommy Rees, Kevin Stefanski pairing is going bad. It seems like that's working well. They're going back to concepts. They're having success on certain days. It's not looking like they're jerking the offense back and forth. Like, it just seems like it's a more cohesive fit with Tommy Rees at offensive coordinator. Say what you want about the Browns having 7 quarterbacks, 6 quarterbacks on the roster, but the main 4 guys we're talking about have all had days where they looked better than what the Browns had starting last year at quarterback, right? There were days where Dylan Gabriel looks awesome. There's days where Shador Sanders looks awesome. There's days where Joe Flacco looks awesome.
in mini camp at least, because we didn't get to see this guy in training camp. Kenny Pickett has had some days where he's looked awesome, right? Not to say that any of these quarterbacks are going to be awesome. It's very not likely to be the case, but it's a lot better than you were last year, right? Think about how you feel about this team today versus the kind of concerning vibes that you had about this team, despite the expectations being higher a year ago, where it was like, oh, well, we just got to hope that this is just a preseason thing. And, oh, well, we just got to hope that they look bad in the preseason because, it's just the preseason, right? We're not really doing all of that cope, right? We're not saying, oh, well, it's just joint practice. We're not finding ourselves having to make those excuses for how this team looks. They look like a normal team out there. Again, I don't think they're going to be world beaters or Super Bowl champions or anything like that this year, but I do think that they're going to be a much more respectable unit than what most people are assuming that this Browns team is going to be. I don't know if quarterback consistency is going to be there for us to be above 500. I've maintained that all offseason. But I do think we're going to be a team that can beat anybody on a given day if we get good enough quarterback play from whoever we're relying on at the quarterback position. That might be inconsistent, but hey, you might be able to one week lose to the Raiders, but you can also the next week beat the Kansas City Chiefs. It's some random, but it's how the NFL works, right? But that's my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Everybody have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.